Today, our key point is that I will be able to solve and graph compound inequalities. In our last video, you learned how to graph the compound inequalities. Now you're going to learn how to solve them in addition to that. It's the same principle though, okay? So the steps for solving compound inequalities. The first thing, just like when you were graphing them, is to break it apart into two separate pieces if you need to. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, okay? You'll solve each inequality by itself, one at a time, as though they were two separate inequalities. And of course, remember, you have to reverse the inequality symbol if you multiply or divide by a negative number. Then you'll graph each solution on the same number line, just like we practiced in the last video, okay? So break it apart into two separate inequalities, solve each inequality separately, remembering to reverse the inequality symbol if you need to, and then you'll graph them on the same number line. All right, let's take a look at some examples. So in this case, I have 2x plus 1 is less than 13, or x minus 5 is greater than or equal to negative 5. This is already in two separate pieces for me, so I don't need to break it apart. I'm going to solve each one separately and graph them on the same number line. All right, so the opposite of addition is subtraction. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. That gives me 0. So I have 2x is less than or equal to 13 minus 1 is 12. Divide both sides by 2. The opposite of multiplication is division. That gives me 1x is less than or equal to 6. So that's the first part of my solution. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. The opposite of subtraction is addition. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. That's the same thing. So that's going to give me x is greater than or equal to negative 5 plus 5 is also 0. So that's the second part. So now I'm going to graph these on the same number line, one at a time, just like I did before. Here's 0, and here's 6, okay? So it says x is less than or equal to 6, and I did not need to flip my inequality sign because I am dividing by a positive number. So that's a closed circle, and less than or equal would be this direction, and I'm going to hold off on putting an arrow just for now. This says x is greater than or equal to 0, so that's another closed circle right at 0. And greater than would be shaded to the right, and so again, I know that my solution is any number between 0 and 6. And if you wanted to, you could choose a number between 0 and 6, put it in for x in each equation, and see if it comes out to be a true statement for both. And that would be a good way to check your work. Okay, let's try another one. All right, in this case, this says that 3x plus 7 is between negative 5 and 10. So in this case, I'm going to need to separate these. And remember that each part needs to have the variable in it. And since this all goes together, each part is going to need this entire expression. So I have negative 5 is less than or equal to 3x plus 7, and then I have 3x plus 7 is less than or equal to 10. Okay, so this piece has to be in both inequalities. Now I'm going to solve both for x, just like I do in any inequality. I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Okay, so I'm left with 3x. And negative 5 minus 7, think of that as adding the opposite, so you would end up with negative 12. Opposite of multiplication is division. I am not dividing by a negative, so I do not switch my sign. That gives me 1x. Negative 12 divided by a positive 3 is negative 4. So that's the first part of my solution. Same thing over here. Subtract 7 from both sides. Opposite of addition is subtraction. I have 3x is less than or equal to 10 minus 7 is 3. Divide both sides by 3, and again it's positive, so I'm okay with my symbol. And I have x is less than or equal to 1. So now I'm going to graph these on the same number line. Here's my 0. Here's negative 4. Now be careful here, this is a closed circle. This says that negative 4 is less than or equal to x. So that means x has to be bigger than negative 4, which means I would shade greater than, which is to the right. And again, I'm going to hold off on my arrowhead. Here's 1. Again, a closed circle. And this says that x is less than or equal to 1. So again, that means that my solution is between negative 4 and 1. And if you wanted to, you could pick a number between negative 4 and 1. 0 is often an easy one to try. And put it in for x and see if you get true statements to check your work. Let's try one more. Okay, so this says that 2x plus 4 is between negative 6 and 10. So again, this is one that I'm going to have to break apart into two pieces before I can solve it. Okay, so the first piece is going to look like that. Negative 6 is less than 2x plus 4. All right, remember that both inequalities has to have this variable piece in it. So the other one is 2x plus 4 is less than or equal to 10. I'm going to solve each one of these separately, one at a time. Okay, I'm going to start here. The opposite of plus 4, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. That's a 0. 2x. Negative 6 minus 4. Again, you can think of that as addition of the opposite, which would give you negative 6 plus negative 4, which is negative 10. This is multiplication. The opposite is division. I am not dividing by a negative, so I don't have to flip my sign. And I have x, negative 10 divided by positive 2 is negative 5. There's my first part of my solution. Same thing here. The opposite of addition is subtraction. Subtract 4 from both sides. I have 2x is less than or equal to 10 minus 4 is 6. Divide both sides by 2. I'm dividing by a positive, so my sign is fine. All right. So now, graphing that on the same number line. Here's 0. Here's negative 5. Open circle at negative 5. And this says negative 5 is less than x. So x has to be bigger than negative 5. Bigger is this direction. And I'm going to hold off on my arrowhead. This says x is less than or equal to 3. That's a closed circle. And less than would be shaded this direction. So my solution is somewhere between negative 5 and 3. And again, if you wanted to check your work, you could put in a point, like 0. Put it in for x in each one of these and see if you get a true statement as a way to check your work. All right, don't forget to write your guiding questions and a good summary statement.